for attending today's webinar with Cobblestone Software and Nexdigm. Our presenters today are Steven Steinberg and Gitika Macher, who I'll be passing it off to shortly. To begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping rules. This webinar will be recorded and distributed to those who registered, so you can rewatch later or share with others in your organization. Also, you may ask questions at any time throughout the Q&A feature located at the top of your screen. There will be time at the end of the presentation for a live Q&A session where Steven and Gitika will be able to answer questions, so please ask away. Next, I want to talk about a giveaway that we're doing. So if you scan the QR code that will be up at the end of the presentation, you can register for a demo and you will automatically win your choice of either a $50 Amazon gift card or a donation to one of these 3 charities that you see on your screen after you attend the demo. So be sure to stick around until the end to scan that QR code. And with that, I'll pass it over to Steven to introduce Cobblestone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Manon. Hi, everyone. My name is Steven Steinberg. I'm a senior account executive here at Cobblestone, and I'm representing the very first CLM that was available on the market. Cobblestone has been in business for over 30 years, delivering industry-leading contract management and e-procurement software powered by AI. Really looking forward to jumping into the topic today. I'm going to pass it over to Gitika for an intro with Nexdigm.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. And a huge shout out to Cobblestone for organizing this. I'm really glad to be here. Hello to everyone joining us today. I'm an associate director at Nexdigm, where I lead CLM solutions across teams working with global clients. And, I've spent a lot of time in this role and previous organizations where I've worked, helping businesses rethink how contracting must fit into their broader business strategies. And, most of my work revolves around, figuring out how contracting can actually keep pace with operations. And Nexdigm has been working with global clients for over 6 decades now. And we've strong expertise in the areas of healthcare, banking, financial services, et al. And we operate across 50 plus countries with on-ground presence in the US, India, UAE, and Poland. And through my work, I've also had the opportunity to see how organizations at different maturity levels approach, the transformation in contracting that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my perspectives today and also learning from this discussion. Thank you, and passing it back to Stephen.
Thanks so much. So we're going to put a poll question out for the audience here. So this is centralized specifically around your current contract management maturity. So if you could select an option here that would fit your organization best, whether you currently manage contracts manually, if you have some digital tools, but your processes are maybe inconsistent, or maybe you have a CLM, but it's not being used to its full potential, or you do have a CLM, you have an optimized data-driven process, or you're not sure, feel free to give us some insight here. We'll just give that several moments for the audience to vote. All right, now here's another question. This one is not so much looking for a response. This is just something to think about as we progress through the presentation today. And it's really, how can we track our contracts to make better business decisions and drive growth within the organization? So something to think about, and would love to dive a little bit deeper into really what it's all about for driving business growth and better decision making through contract lifecycle management.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen, for that. So everybody, when we talk about dashboarding and reporting in contract management, let me break it to you up front. The real value isn't visibility, it is actually foresight. Historically, most organizations have used reporting reactively. We track what has already happened and step in when really something goes off track. The shift that we're now seeing and actively helping drive, Stephen in his role at Cobblestone, me in my role at Nexdigm and our teams, it is more about, transitioning from monitoring to predicting. The real purpose of dashboards is to help leaders anticipate, what may be coming and not just explain what went wrong. So, the shift fundamentally changes how stakeholders engage with, the data that is sitting within your contracts. Instead of asking, where do we stand, and waiting for, static reports, manual inputs, leaders can now really interact with live contract intelligence, slicing data across, maybe risk exposures, commercial value, obligations, timelines, you name it. And, they could arrive at answers real time. And I'd like to add that where this becomes particularly powerful is in pattern recognition. So, when contracts are viewed individually, they often appear manageable. But, when portfolio level analytics is applied, systemic trends start showing up, they start surfacing. And, something like, let's say, recurring negotiation friction, clauses that consistently slow down execution, or vendor performance patterns that might otherwise remain invisible. All of that starts coming to light. So, these insights simply do not emerge without strong data discipline across, your contracting portfolio. Another significant advantage of this is proactive alerting. So if your dashboards are well defined, any upcoming renewals, expiries, or obligation milestones, they get flagged and to the right stakeholder well in advance, which obviously, it converts into fewer missed renewals, reduced negotiation pressures that are mostly last minute, and significantly stronger commercial positioning. So, that said, most effective dashboarding requires an important mindset shift. And I couldn't miss mentioning this. The objective actually is not comprehensive reporting. So, not everything that can be measured should be measured, if I could put it in other words. It is selective, intentional dashboarding, right? So, you want to focus on what matters right now, the few decision driving metrics that for a stakeholder truly influence business outcomes. So, yeah, um, those are some thoughts that I had. Stephen, if I may bring you into the conversation here, how would you decide whether what should be on a dashboard versus what shouldn't? What is your radar?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Gitika. Yeah, I mean, really understanding the visibility that matters is really what should
Mm,
be on those dashboards, whether it's instant visibility into the statuses of contracts and really looking at the performance obligations and performance
mm,
metrics. Having all of that in one place, it really helps you slice and dice the data. That's really important, especially with a tool like Cobblestone. You get those real-time data insights,
yeah.
really focusing on the data that matters most. And whether that's advanced reporting metrics or really just understanding the metrics that are needed to get ahead of renewals. I mean, the system isn't just
Mm,
tracking dates, it's really predicting renewals and outcomes, and really giving you those alerts that surface well in advance, really so teams aren't scrambling at the last minute. So it's really important to have that foundation readily
mm,
available. And by keeping dashboards intentional and uncluttered, leaders
mm.
can quickly see really what requires immediate attention, really without being overwhelmed. And that's really how dashboards move teams from reacting to contracts,
Mhm.
so you can really see what's coming next.
Certainly. Great point. Well made, Stephen. All right. So, that's how dashboards and reporting start turning contract data into decision-ready insights. And I believe this is a good point for Stephen to now bring in how clause libraries and AI-led clause management really helps build that foundation of a strong dashboarding structure. Over to you, Stephen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gitika. Yeah, well, I mean, clause libraries are really the backbone of contract management. I mean, by centralizing these approval clauses, organizations really are ensuring consistency and ensuring compliance across agreements.
Mhm,
And that really it does a number of things. I mean, it reduces risk, it eliminates the need to redo language in every single contract, manually copy and pasting from Word documents. And then taking that a step further by introducing AI. I mean, we're in an AI revolution now. AI is in everything, but really using it to the benefit of efficient clause management that really allows users to more efficiently and automatically not only identify, but extract and categorize clauses in a matter of seconds. And before, this was a task that was very manual for legal teams. So this means that now, by introducing AI technology into clause management, this really means that legal teams can spend less time on repetitive tasks and more time on strategic work. And that's really what the whole purpose of having a system like this is. Having
mhm,
AI with intelligent clause library, it also, again, ensures consistency, and it really helps flag risky clauses and suggest non-standard terms, and even being able to suggest alternatives from your organization's playbooks, and past negotiations, having insight into what we've done in the past is also crucial for this. So I think I thought of an interesting question with these points here. So I guess, Gitika, from your perspective, what would you say the biggest challenges organizations face today when really trying to maintain clause consistency across contracts? What do you think that biggest challenge is?
I may be picking from what you already have mentioned, but to me, the biggest challenge, is that clause ownership is usually fragmented. It's scattered. Different teams negotiate, store, and then they reuse, those clauses in silos, often relying on past contracts, right? Or sometimes individual judgment for the lack of a playbook or a mechanism that governs everything centrally, right? So over time, that leads to multiple versions of the same clause circulating, across the organization, each with its slight variations here and there, and no clear view of which one really reflects, my company's real current risk posture, if that answers your question.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So, okay. Thanks, Stephen. I think what you covered on the last slide really highlights how standardization strengthens decision making. I'd like to build on that by looking at how organizations really translate that consistency into structured contract risk management. So, when we talk about understanding contract risk procedures, I personally often begin with one simple but revealing question in talking to potential clients or even existing ones, which is that is risk management in your organization, is it systemic or is it incidental? And I think that just gets everybody thinking. And that's a question I'd like also the audience to think through as, we talk through the rest of the content here. So, in mature contracting environments, risk is never managed ad hoc or let's say left to individual judgment. It's really embedded into how contracts move across that organization or that business. And this has to start with clear risk categorization, knowing upfront which contracts in your entire universe of contracts are low, which one are high risk, which one are medium, and deliberately having mechanisms around them being treated differently. You could say that this is seen reflected in approval workflows that are in turn tied to risk appetite or risk thresholds of an organization. And you also see standard playbooks and fallback positions, so teams they don't have to reinvent risk decisions each time they're negotiating. And importantly, there are predefined escalation paths. I mean, there have to be predefined escalation paths when contracts deviate from standard positions rather than, last minute fire drills where there are bound to be leakages. And, very interestingly, here, I'd like to mention that risk governance does not end at signature either. So in fact, I've seen that this is often where risk management becomes all the more crucial, sensitive, and critical. There has to be clear post-signature ownership, accountability for, say, tracking obligations, notices, renewals, even performance commitments. Without this basic clarity, all we're doing is, seeing risk shift from legal to business, without it being actively managed. And if it would be unfair to, to not bring up risk mitigation here, because that's also where a common misconception exists. And what I've seen with, not just clients, but sometimes legal professionals also. So when we talk mitigation, it's often, interpreted or assumed to mean changing just the clause language. While in reality, mitigation is about ensuring that, risks are proactively managed, they're clearly owned. The objective is to not let it happen, right? So mitigating in a sense that before something materializes, before that risk surfaces as a dispute, as a loss of revenue, or perhaps an operational disruption, you do whatever's needed. So, it's disciplined obligation and performance tracking that I'm talking about here. Strong exception management, very, very important, which means clearly flagging what deviates, from standards. So, leadership attention and executive stakeholder attention is focused where it really, really matters. And everything else is standardized and governed by, a structure that should be there. And in short, so I'd say that contract risk management is less about, the legal language and more about the disciplined execution throughout the life cycle that I was talking about earlier. And any thoughts on that, Stephen?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say when it comes to risk management and approval
Mhm.
flows, it's always better to be proactive than reactive, and
Yeah.
not, reacting once a problem shows up. It's good to anticipate early enough
Mm.
to intervene early, course
Mhm.
correct. I mean, protect the business before the risk turns into cost or disputes. And many
Yeah.
organizations do a solid job up front,
Mhm.
categorizing risk, especially routing approvals, defining playbooks. I mean, really, we see the biggest risks often surface after signature. That's really when the
Absolutely.
contract moves out of legal's hands and goes to the business. That's when we see
Mhm.
everything starts to show up. I mean, you see missed notices and silent renewals and
Mm.
obligations that are untracked and just performance commitments that no one is actively monitoring. So that's really where risk quietly compounds into the real cost. And that's really where contract lifecycle management, I mean, specifically contract intelligence,
Mhm.
changes the equation. CLM doesn't just document risk, it identifies the risk exposure across your portfolio, and really it helps you actively mitigate potential liabilities.
Most certainly, Stephen. So, so that's how risk becomes visible and manageable across the contract life cycle. But, how this is deeply linked to sourcing, vendor performance, and spend outcomes is something maybe you can now, draw, draw lines to. And this is how end-to-end contract management supports the broader business decisions. So, go
Yeah.
for it, Stephen. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, Cobblestone does have a lot of experience in the realm of contract management, but way early on, we've identified that also incorporating the sourcing life cycle, the procurement functions, and the procurement life cycle into your contract process is crucial. There's a lot of organizations that have decentralized contracting and procurement processes, and a lot of times they don't connect, they don't speak to each other, and they're not under one roof. So really, essentially, by having a platform that keeps vendor and sourcing and spending and contract management all under one roof, this is really what creates a centralized space for procurement and legal teams. I mean, instead of juggling multiple systems, organizations really gain that full end-to-end visibility. That's everything from supplier performance to sourcing events to contract awarding and contract obligations, and then ultimately connecting the pieces for spend management too. It doesn't end just after the contract lifecycle. I mean, having that full visibility from that source to contract lifecycle all the way through the spend management. I mean, this is the realm where we start to see the topic of data integration come to play, especially with other mission critical systems that need to communicate information across businesses, across departments. And this really helps drive cost control and compliance. I mean, it has you monitoring your budgets and looking at your policies and how those are
Mhm.
enforced against the contracts and the obligations. I mean, this is really what improves collaboration, not just across procurement and legal, but also looping in finance. And this ultimately helps support reducing delays and errors. And really, I guess my final point with this is really with data being centralized. I mean, businesses can leverage analytics. You can make smarter sourcing decisions, ultimately strengthening vendor relationships and contractual outcomes. And really, this approach effectively delivers efficiency, transparency, and strategic advantage. We see that a lot with our clients that choose to integrate their full sourcing life cycle. So I guess, Gitika, when you
Mhm.
work with clients that you hear about different operations that are being juggled, different sourcing and legal obligations being juggled together, sometimes across multiple systems, what pain points do you hear most often, would you say? Maybe when teams are having to juggle multiple
Yeah.
tools for these type of functions.
So it's fragmentation again, right? Like I answered earlier when you asked me a question around dashboarding. Even here, what I hear most often, Stephen, is lack of end-to-end visibility and ownership, most importantly. When processes, accountability, view is split across systems, and this typically leads to loose control and visibility, slower cycle times, higher compliance risk, obviously missed commercial opportunities. So I think having a unified view that you were talking about earlier really also sets the foundation for analytics and smarter sourcing. So it's a domino effect. If one thing doesn't work, then it has an impact on a lot of other important parameters. So I think thank you, Stephen. What you just explained really shows how integrated life cycle visibility, if I may call it that, how it really supports stronger decision making. And if I may, let me, move to the next part of our discussion by focusing on one practical lens quick. It's identifying bottlenecks that quietly kill, and, how it slows down contracting and decision velocity and often sits unnoticed. So, when I look at bottlenecks in contracting, and Stephen, you and I were talking about this earlier too, I don't think we see delays, right? Whether you're a product organization or I come from a company that's, mostly operating on the service side of things, we don't see delays. We do see signals though. So, bottlenecks reveal where decision making really slows down, where, let's say, risk quietly is hidden, and where value begins to leak out of the contracting process. And importantly, bottlenecks rarely sit within a single team. They always sit in between teams, so to say, in the handoffs, if I may use that term here. That's where contract reviews, they just stall, waiting for missing inputs. Approvals may pause because ownership isn't more often than not defined clearly. Or, vendors slow down because expectations were never fully aligned. And manual efforts now start filling gaps that systems were meant to eliminate. And on the surface, it appears to be delay, while in reality, it is very often a lack of shared context and coordination. Every unresolved bottleneck, I'd like to put it this way: it intensifies three areas that matter most to top exec leadership. Your cycle times become longer, risk exposure becomes higher, and there's more colossal revenue leakage. And all this is happening because of the bottlenecks that are sitting there, but we're not addressing the elephant in the room. And the longer those bottlenecks remain invisible, the more they become accepted as BAU. So I'll resist the temptation to go deeper here and instead focus on the practical takeaway. Just to sum it, bottlenecks, they really they rarely require organizations to work harder. What they really require is for us to design smarter at the very onset. That means, say, clear ownership, better aligned workflows, stronger coordination across the legal, procurement, and business teams. I'd also like to add that technology plays a critical enabling role, but in my experience, honestly, sustained success is far more dependent on governance clarity, and adoption discipline rather than on just the tool alone, right? So I think I'll close my segment with this. Thank you for being such a patient audience, everybody. And Stephen, if I may ask you a little question here because I'm just intrigued, and I see we do have time. From your experience, what is the biggest misconception, if I may use that word, that you've seen leaders carry about, process bottlenecks?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, really, when what looks like a delay on the surface is usually something more specific underneath. It could be a contract stuck waiting on a missing data point or missing date, approval stalled because, the ownership of that is not clear. Maybe a vendor is the one that's slowing things down because expectations weren't explicitly defined, or teams filling gaps with manual work that systems could and should have covered. Really, a lot of times these bottlenecks don't live within one team. And that's interesting. You mentioned about the bottlenecks popping up as signals. It's really the next step there should really be pinpointing where they occur and why. And I mean, bottlenecks aren't always a people problem. They don't usually require more effort. They're just signals of unclear ownership and misaligned
Hmm.
workflows and tools that are really just out of context for the business. So when
Yeah,
you design workflows and approvals for clarity and shared context, those bottlenecks stop being so normalized and they start becoming opportunities to move faster. And obviously, with that, there's less risk and less leakage.
absolutely.
So something for the audience to think about. I mean, when something slips, do you usually know why and where these happen? So something to think about. I know on our next slide, we do have another question for the group. And this is, again, something to think about. If you'd like to put in a response for this, please feel free. But if CLM became your most trusted source for your decision making, not just for storage, not just as a repository, what would your team do differently tomorrow? So I'll let that resonate for just one moment and see if the group has any feedback on that, but definitely something to think about using these tools to the maximum potential. That's really where you start to see the ROI and the benefit. Okay, and I will pass it over to Manon for closing remarks.
All right, thank you, Stephen and Gitika, for all of your insights today. We do have some remaining time for a Q&A session, so feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat. I do have a couple questions from the back end already, so we'll go over those.
Sure.
The first one that I have is how customizable are dashboards for different stakeholders?
Yeah,
If I
absolutely.
may take that one.
Yeah,
Sure.
perfect.
So I'd say very customizable, right? Especially with Cobblestone in context. So, effective dashboards tailor visibility based on stakeholder priorities, what they need, right? Whether that's, risk exposure for legal or procurement wants to, slice and dice through spend visibility or performance metrics for business teams. So straight answer, very customizable, but I'm sure you have a lot of other, points to add to that one, Stephen.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind is role-based access. That's the big
Mm,
term that we hear across departments is really
yeah.
having it where multiple businesses, multiple entities could be looking at the same dashboard, but the information
Mm,
that they see on that dashboard could be completely different just based on the permissions that a user has been assigned and created within the app. And this really
mhm.
saves ramp up and management of the system a lot better because you're not having to create 30 different dashboards for the same scope. You can create one dashboard and then filter it out based on assigned permissions. And we find a lot of our clients benefit greatly from leveraging role-based access.
Excellent.
Great. I have another question here. It says, how do you identify bottlenecks without slowing teams down further?
Yeah,
How
Gitika,
do
did
you
you want to?
identify? Yeah, I could take a shot at that. So, I'd say by analyzing workflow data and handoff timelines rather than bringing in or adding new checkpoints, which means bottlenecks are diagnosed through visibility rather than, adding more process layers. How does that sound for
Absolutely.
an answer, Stephen? Anything
Yeah,
that I may be missing?
yeah, no, I mean, this identifying bottlenecks. I mean, it's all about
Mhm.
identifying the exact stage where your contracts and your approvals or even vendor
Mm,
actions are slowing progress. I mean, having
yeah,
insight, having all of that digitized, it really helps you diagnose whether the
yeah.
issue is data, whether it's a process, a review cycle, or cross-department dependency.
Yeah, because, I'd just like to add as closure that ownership mostly breaks down at transition points, particularly between business procurement and legal during intake negotiation and then also pre-signature. So, without adding more complexities, it's best to sit back and make a careful analysis. All right. Any more questions, Manon, or do
Perfect.
you want to?
Yeah, I think that's all the questions that we
Mhm.
have. Before we officially close out, I'm just going to launch one more poll.
Okay.
Um, Give me one second. So this poll is just asking basically if you're ready for a demo. So if you could take a minute to answer that. It's just taking a second to load. I'm sorry. But if you do answer yes, you can see on your screen there's a QR code, and also in the chat there is a link to register for a demo. So you can register for that, and then you'll automatically win your choice of either a $50 Amazon gift card or a donation to one of these charities that you see on your screen. So I'll give you guys a minute to do that. The poll question actually is not loading, so we'll skip over that for now. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. We hope you enjoyed the presentation and got some valuable information out of it. We'll be following up with a recording and some other resources in the coming days, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for
Thanks
making
all.
it.
Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
man, and
day. Take care.
everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks.